Hey, my name's CG and Rain, and in this video, we're going to talk about how to play the Revive in Trials of Osiris. What does playing the Revive mean? Playing the Revive means leveraging down players to help you gain an advantage during a Trials match. There's only two ways Revives come into play. You're either trying to revive a teammate, or you're trying to prevent the revive of an opponent. Before we move on, let's go over a few basic rules for reviving. Rule number 1, never attempt to revive when you are in an enemy's line of sight. At best, they're going to stop your revive, or at worst, they might kill you or the guy you just picked up, and he's going to be pissed off because you just got informed. Number 2, do not res a teammate while said teammate's orb is in clear sign of an enemy. If you're going to do this, at minimum, slide into his floating body so he doesn't get a free haircut from that guy with 10,000 revoker kills. A better option, in my opinion, is to get the res and immediately push the revoker guy, putting shots into his face so he either bails or you flinch the guy into missing the shot. Number 3, you can do damage to a revived player. Immediately use this to your advantage if the other team is stupid enough to revive one of their guys right in front of you. In the words of White Goodman, he's going down like a sweet muffin. You can just put shots into his head immediately while he's sitting there in that free floating animation. Just drop him, man. Alright, we got those basic rules out of the way, so let's get into reviving a teammate. Ideally, the best res is the one you don't have to get, meaning that no one on your team died that round. Unfortunately, we're not Panda and we're not Frostbolt, so dying is going to be a frequent occurrence. There are a million ways a revive scenario can play out during a Trials match, but if you break them all down, you can usually fit them into two categories. Category 1, your teammate dies in a relatively safe area that is easily accessible and defendable by you and your remaining teammate. This is the ideal situation. This is what you want. Category 2, pretty much the opposite of Category 1. Your teammate dies behind enemy lines because he's an idiot and pushes into 3 dudes with a shotgun. This is generally where I fall into. This is not easily defendable or accessible, and you're going to have to kill at least one enemy player most of the time to get this res. Let's talk about setting up this Category 1 revive. Step number 1, start by getting to a position that is near the orb, but also highly defensible. Remember, at this point, the enemy outnumbers you 3-2, and you're going to have to play cautious and close to cover. You should never be more than 1 to 2 steps away from cover, especially when outnumbered. Titans and Warlocks should take advantage of their class abilities because both are great for holding a position. For the love of God, when you place your barricade, put it in front of the orb, because if you don't, your teammate is going to get farmed and they're going to be mad, and they're probably not going to send you a Christmas card this year or play Trials with you ever again. Step 2, use this defensive position to drive the enemy team back. Pretend like it's your Aunt Glenda's Chihuahua and you're using your foot to keep that little spawn of Satan from biting you in the crotch. You don't have to kill the other players to get a res, but you do have to dish out some form of punishment via gunfire or grenades to back them into cover so you can pick your guy up. Speaking of grenades are a great zoning tool. Use them to block off lanes that the enemy might use to push, giving you precious seconds to get that res. Step 3. If we get to Step 3, this means you were unsuccessful at pushing the enemy team back. They will likely be treating you like a new inmate in Cell Block D, doing whatever they want with you with little resistance or threat of retaliation. Our only play at this point is to slap the biggest guy in the joint and turn defense into offense. What I mean here is punishing the enemy's overaggression with a little of your own. Use grenades to soften aggressive players that push for easier cleanups. Break line of sight and immediately re-engage. Special weapons are great at this. Remember to use cover tightly and bail if you get weak. You want the enemy to always think you are a threat, even if you get cornered. Use baiting techniques to try and force the enemy to engage. Basically what I mean is hold the revive button for a split second and then release it in preparation for a gunfight. Reviving a teammate makes a subtle audio cue along with a different shading on the orb which may cause the enemy to panic or push a lane. Use this to your advantage. Baiting only works when the enemy does not currently have line of sight on you, so be careful. Now that we have talked about a Category 1 revive, let's talk about how to play a Category 2 revive. Category 2 revives are the least desirable position to be in. It limits options, and making a mistake here will often lose you the round. The enemy team will have two options when playing around a Category 2 revive. Option 1, they will push you like a fat kid pushes those orange popsicles from 5th grade. Option 2, they will build a tent and move in around your orb like your third cousin did when he found out you hit that $3 scratch off for $1.5 million. Depending on which option your enemy chooses will determine your response. Enemy teams that push hyper-aggressively in a 3v2 are oftentimes more mechanically skilled than you, or at least they think they are. They will pursue you relentlessly, so splitting from your remaining teammate is a bad idea. In this situation, the enemy will often split apart and try to hit you from different angles simultaneously. You treat this push as you would a Category 1 revive. Use their aggressiveness against them. Break line of sight and smack them in the mouth. If you have time, find a defensive position near cover and try to slow the push as best you can. Try to time grenades so they get hit as they're pushing, softening them up for an easier kill. If they split and set up for a pinch, Do your best to combine all your sources of information and try to make a mental image of where they are. This means watching radar and using sound cues to determine what they're doing. Almost always, the pinch will be two enemies from one direction and a single enemy from a different direction. Try to figure out which side the single enemy and aggressively push that side in a 2v1. Killing him will even the odds. If your enemy decides that they don't like orange push pops and instead would rather go camping, employ these strategeries. The best play is to lightly apply pressure and wait for an opening. Frequently rotating positions and angles might disorient the enemy team. Splitting up from your remaining teammate can be risky, but with some coordination and careful play, you might be able to catch an enemy out of position and pinch him for an easy kill. You want to try to bait them into doing something stupid like giving up a good position for a worse position that favors you and your remaining teammate. This totally wouldn't work on me or anything. If it's a solid stalemate with neither team giving up ground on the other, sometimes a good play is to take control of the cap point and force the enemy to engage you. You're still in a 3v2, but at least the ball is in your court and you control where the fight happens and what cover to use. Another tool I want to go over is supers. During a Category 1 revive, you can throw a super to simply run the enemy team away from the orb, allowing your remaining teammate to grab the res. Ideally, you want to kill at least one enemy with your super, but even if you don't, getting your down teammate back in the fight will even the odds. Be careful not to overextend and get teamed by all three players. Your teammate will be reviving your guy and not be able to support you until he completes the revive. Little side note here, off video. If you get teamed out in super, everybody's going to be looking at you like, what a loser! Alright, back to the video. Once everyone is up, you should try to capitalize on any remaining super energy you have left to try and get at least one enemy down. Now that we have discussed setting up a revive, let's talk about how to prevent the enemy from rezzing one of their guys. The same basic categories apply here as to getting one of your own guys back into the game. One difference that I would like to strongly emphasize is that once your team gets a pick, all members of your team should stop what they're doing and start attempting to get a sightline and control over the downed enemy. Don't stand there with your thumb firmly planted, dildoing around, waiting on the enemy to res their guy. This doesn't mean rushing in without purpose or cause, but control the orb. You want the enemy team to have to work for this revive. Now that we have our enemy in a Category 2 revive situation, we need to decide how to approach. Depending on your team's individual skill and the skill level of the enemy team, you can either push this 3v2 advantage with little fear of them ever reaching the revive, or you can camp the down orb and make them push you. But who are we kidding? We're going to cram it down the cram hole. If your team is confident in their mechanical skills, pushing a 3v2 advantage is probably a good idea. Ending a round quickly by pushing a 3v2 is also a better plan, especially if you are behind in rounds or the other team has high intellect. Camping bastards. With a 3v2 push, you want to try and pinch the enemy between your players. One thing you should not do when trying to execute a pinch is leaving gaps that the enemy can squeeze through, allowing them to get back to their down teammate. You should always position yourself between the downed orb and the remaining enemy players. Try not to over-pursue and get yourself into a 2v1 situation. Great players can turn aggressiveness against you very quickly, as we've already discussed. Try not to fully ape and always expect the enemy to re-engage you at any time. A pinch should be a cohesive movement between all three players. Overextending could lead to death, resetting your positive position to a neutral one, with it now being a 2v2 where each side controls one enemy revive. On the flip side to this, the enemy team might be more mechanically skilled than you. Usually this is where I fall in. You may not be confident in pushing a 3v2. In this case, sometimes camping the orb is a better strategy. Having high intellect also benefits this strategy. You can set up a tent and a little bonfire while you wait for your super. You can also emote the dead guy, which is sure to piss him off. This sets you up for success in later rounds and can frustrate the enemy into making a bad push. As with prior examples, you want to set up a defensive position around the orb where your team can stop any attempt at a revive. Hopefully, the enemy makes a bad push and a second opponent can be quickly teamed. If they are more calculated, they will likely use grenades and try to force you off the revive. If you get tagged hard, find immediate cover because good players might try to capitalize on you being hurt. They may also rotate angles and try to separate for a pinch. If you know they are split, sometimes sending a full 3v1 blitz can get the second enemy down. You have to be careful not to overextend and get baited away from the downed enemy you already have control of. If you can't get the 3v1 kill in a few seconds, retreat back to the downed orb and wait until another opportunity presents itself. Now that we've talked about preventing a Category 2 revive, let's move to preventing a Category 1 revive. A Category 1 revive is a much better revive situation for the enemy and will require a little more finesse to prevent this type of revive. As with preventing any revive, all players should start to advance their position toward the pick as soon as possible. Remember, no dildoing around. Grenades should be thrown liberally at the orb to give any remaining teammates time to get into a better position to guard the res or prevent the enemy players from immediately picking their guy back up. If any grenades do major damage to the enemy, your team should probably push. If a push is decided, all members should engage quickly before the enemy has a chance to heal from the grenade spam. Enemy players may use Titan Barricades or Warlock Rifts to try and safely get a revive. If you have extra special ammo, spam it into the barricade to break it quickly so you can maintain a clear sight line on the orb. If you know they're sitting in a rift, wait it out before pushing. A rift overshield might be enough for them to survive your push and actually kill you. Sometimes pushing may not be an option. You may be worried that 420 No Scope 69 will clap you if you try a push. Camping the pit can be a viable strategy. As mentioned before, you can build a super, or if the pick is away from the cap point, you can wait for cap and have two guys hold the res while you cap the zone. This is also a better play against cheaters. By the way, get sued, Perfect Aim. The enemy team might also use a super in this situation as a last-ditch effort to win the round or simply get their teammate back in the fight. Depending on your team skill and the super that is cast will determine your response. If you hear a super pop, you should immediately create space. You may give up control of that orb, but this is better than dying. Do your best to maintain sightline on the orb so you can prevent any revive attempts. Sometimes this isn't possible, especially if the super is zeroed in on you. Some supers are better at pushing people back than others. Surviving is top priority. If they get a revive, it's still 3v3. Try not to give them more than that. Running away from the super is usually a good bet since the other guy, not in super, will be grabbing the revive and won't be able to get into a position where he and the super can box you in for an easy kill for the super. Alright, that's all the time we have for today. Whoever made it to the end of this is already flawless in my book. If you found this video helpful, consider dropping it a like. I'm planning on making content for Beyond Light, and I hope to see y'all soon.